But welcome back. I have with me again Sports Law Lust on Twitter, attorney Dan Lust. We have a new episode in the Snyder saga. This is kind of, I guess, a mini episode. It's kind of a derivative of what's going on with the Snyder stuff. The John Gruden emails that came from the Washington football team commander investigation that were somehow leaked. We have some news on that. And the NFL is basically saying, we have no part in this.
Yeah. So we'll say it's another installment of like Snyder saga. We can pick up where we last left this, but really at this point, it's been about every month, maybe like every couple of weeks, we have another really big development. So people might say like Dan Snyder is Teflon. He's a cockroach at this point. Like, why won't the man go away? But once you start getting into territories where the NFL is looking bad, and now by my count, maybe it's 3-4 times that Snyder has directly made the NFL look bad. It's going to apply a little bit more pressure to them. So, yeah, Doug's, I'm told this is Barstool, so we can have a little bit of fun with this. But, on the non-fun side, like I had to read 79 pages of the congressional report, 210 pages of the GOP's report. And I will tell everybody, right, those reports came out yesterday. I would say if people don't want to waste their time reading it, I'd say like 95% of the material we've known ahead of time. Like, is it going to shock anybody that Dan Snyder was being, obstructing his deposition and saying like, I don't recall 100 times? Like, no, it's not going to shock anybody. Is it going to shock anyone that Congress found that Dan Snyder knew more than he let on and was purposefully involved in this stuff? And he knew what was going on in these investigations. And he's hired private investigators. No, we all knew that. Now, what I want to focus on today, and listen, it's your show. We can do whatever we want, but I think I want people to know that 5% is a really big 5%. That could mean the difference of the NFL being hit with a lot of money, a huge lawsuit by this guy, John Gruden, who we can get into. It's peeling back the layers here. But the development yesterday, which I'm happy to unpack. If you were John Gruden's lawyers, you're doing backflips. It is a huge development. And one that I think the NFL is very nervous about. It does threaten to really pull back, that proverbial curtain and see what went on between Goodell, the NFL, Snyder, the Commanders. So I do think I'd be worried if I was at NFL HQ.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about it here before. We went over, we had an episode on the DC Attorney General, the lawsuits he's bringing as from a civil point. And, he brought 2 of them. It seemed to be just kind of like him wanting attention. Who knows where those are going? This is actually going on. There's a current lawsuit playing out in the court system. The emails came out that John Gruden had allegedly sent to a member of the Washington Commanders football team, the staff. And there were some racist words. I truthfully, I haven't read it, but from what I've been told, it was some racist language, and that messed with his money. And so we talked about this before. Basically, John Gruden is suing the NFL, and now more than likely Dan Snyder, because emails that he did send were released. And that messed with his contract. So it's not a matter of, hey, you're saying I said something I didn't say. He did send these emails. He's not arguing that, but he's arguing, hey, these emails were released that didn't need to be released. And you've messed with my money. So now I'm coming after you.
That's generally it. I mean, I think for some background, like people can follow, John Gruden signed a $100 million contract over 10 years with the, then the Oakland Raiders, now the Las Vegas Raiders. So that contract would made him one of the highest paid coaches in football, and it paid him through 2028, the highest paid coach in the entire league. So when those emails came out, just for a little bit of background, and I'm sure there's some people in the weeds of this, but those emails were again, Doug, as you point out, sent to members of the Washington organization, not emails sent like, I don't know, the last 5 years, emails sent when John Gruden was a broadcaster for ESPN. Why are we talking about the emails? Because during these, the Snyder saga, I think it's part 4 for us, but during this whole investigation, the NFL looked into this organization, and at what I think they probably did, they haven't confirmed this, but they did like a keyword search. They're trying to do like toxic workplace investigation. They're going to look up bad words that you shouldn't be using on a company email server. So they find some bad words. They find, there's litany of words. You can look them up that you would think that should not be on a company computer. And what I think happened is that John Gruden kept coming up in these emails. So these emails, came out at the time, and at the The lawyers on this case gave these to the NFL, put them to the NFL's attention. So the NFL was aware of the emails. Obviously, they were on Washington servers. They were aware of the emails. The lawyers were aware of the emails. And you'd think, right, if the NFL is aware of the emails, like the NFL is made of all 32 NFL clubs, like probably Mark Davis, the owner of the Raiders, is in possession of those emails. So at the time when those emails are released, and if you remember, Doug's, I remember this was in the weeds. One email was released on like a Friday. It was about a racist comment about DeMaurice Smith, the head of the NFLPA. And then over the weekend, more emails came out. So it was like a staggered, almost like a purposeful release. And it was kind of unclear why this would be done. It was different outlets.
You rip it over a weekend, so it's just constantly in the news.
Right. It was done in a very odd manner, we'll say. So what happens? Gruden loses his job. He resigns. He doesn't get fired. There's a whole story. We think Mark Davis probably paid him something on the way out, but we don't really know that. But some type of settlement agreement, we're not really sure. But Doug's, to your point, Gruden lost that contract. He's not getting paid the remainder of the $100 million over 10 years. So what does he do? He goes, I want to sue the person that leaked those emails. And Gruden, and I remember people were trying to figure it online. It was probably the NFL. They're, a woke league. They're trying to get rid of everybody. And then maybe it was Mark Davis because the Raiders, haven't been that good under Gruden's tenure and really haven't been that good since. And then there were some people that were like, maybe it's Dan Snyder. Doesn't he collect dirt on everyone? Like, doesn't that sound a lot like something Dan Snyder would do? But everybody read it off until yesterday, Doug's. Until yesterday, when that little 5% of that report I was telling you, something came out. So Bruce Allen is the president of the former president of the then Washington Redskins. He gave a deposition to Congress. And in that deposition, he told Congress that he called up the NFL, Lisa Friel, their counsel, and said, hey, did you guys do the leak? And Lisa Friel goes, no, that came from the Commanders. So I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but, from sworn deposition testimony given to Congress, a former employee who was the president of the organization said he spoke to the NFL and the NFL put it back on the Commanders. So right now, Gruden is just suing the NFL. The NFL obviously is comprised of the Commanders, but he's not suing Dan Snyder personally. He's not suing the Commanders by name. So I think that's the next level here. Now, it's not just Gruden versus NFL. I think it's going to be Gruden versus NFL versus Dan Snyder. So, he's got another X on his back.
Yeah, and we'll play it. I'll have to splice all these things together because I'm sure we said it in a former episode. We said how silly it would be for Dan Snyder to have released these to try and draw the scent off of himself, because any rational person, and you would think, hey, if this guy was able to save up enough money and work his way up the corporate ladder and make millions of dollars in order to buy a football team, and he's worth billions now, you think he has some kind of common sense. You would think a rational person would know, hey, even if I draw their attention away, they're still going to be looking at me. They're not going to ignore me. And we talked about, obviously, a rational person wouldn't do that. It sounds like Dan Snyder did that. It sounds like he tried to buy himself some time and then did nothing with that time.
You know what it's like? It's like, right. It's like if there's a house that's going through like an incredible inferno and the giant house is up in flames. And then Dan Snyder walks down the street and takes his little Zippo lighter out and lights a little bush on fire. He's like, hey guys, look at that little bush. Dan Snyder's being investigated for stealing money from other owners. And I'm recapping a little of our own stuff, but stealing from other owners via, underreporting revenue sharing, stealing from fans from season ticket deposits, sexual assault, sexual harassment, toxic workplace. That little fire, that little distractive effort, if that ends up being, confirmed that it actually was Washington with the leak, I mean, it certainly backfired on them. I mean, it's just the optics. Otherwise, Doug's would be sitting here and be like, yeah, the whole report, kind of a waste of congressional time and efforts. They just confirmed everything we already knew. But they were able to unpack something that no one has been able to find out thus far. Washington Post, the New York Times, ESPN's been all over this. No one has come out with that nugget. So, people can blame Congress for wasting time with this effort, which it's probably a fair criticism. But something new did come out. So for our sports fans or our tortured Washington Commanders fans, I know you have at least one over at Barstool HQ with PFT. This is probably a good day.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, they call him Teflon Dan. The things are starting to pile up that are actual, not what they said. the walls are closing in, or another bombshell. You hear that from the news all the time, like whenever they want somebody out. It seems like there's actual things, and because we're talking about money, it seems like actual things are starting to stick together. Now, as far as the Gruden lawsuit, now that he has, the ability or the right to add Dan Snyder, not right, whatever the word is, people will say with respect to that, he can add him. With that, is the NFL, if they say, hey, it wasn't us, it was Dan Snyder, is the NFL still involved? Because Dan Snyder is still an owner. So how does that lawsuit move past or go on?
So, yeah, I mean, we should mention, you phrased it correctly, like the messing with my money lawsuit, like it's called the tortious interference with the contract lawsuit. It's something that happens when you have obviously a contract between two people and a third party does something to end up ruining that relationship. So it's a little complicated, but right now the NFL is the named party, right? You can imagine the NFL has insurance for different lawsuits. Washington Commanders have their own insurance. Dan Snyder, I'm sure, has personal lines of insurance. So, we'll see who's picking up. Snyder might have to hire his own lawyer. I imagine the NFL has been defending that with one kind of unified front, but the story that maybe you and I will talk about at a different time, like these FTX lawsuits or the Board Ape lawsuits, like those are class action lawsuits involving a lot of different people that might not be connected to one another, might truly have conflicts with respect to one another. So for those big class action lawsuits, you have a lot of different lawyers that are hired. But if the NFL is sued and the NFL encompasses the Commanders and the Commanders aren't sued separately, Commanders don't need their own lawyer for that. They'd use the NFL lawyer. But now if the Commanders are named separately or Dan Snyder is named separately, you have to hire some more attorneys. You might now have the NFL and Snyder being averse to one another and maybe fighting each other, what we would call something called cross claims, where defendants file claims against one another. Right? The NFL's main defense to this tortious interference case is like, we didn't do the leak. It wasn't us. We don't know how the stuff got out. It wasn't us. Could have been like a WikiLeaks type hacker that got in and had issues with John Gruden. It could have been anybody. But now we don't just go from it could be anybody. Now we have someone within the organization, former employee, pointing a finger at the organization. So Bruce Allen would be in the know, right? He would be in a position to speak to someone like Lisa Friel at NFL HQ. So it's not, Dan Snyder's comments. He's going to say Bruce Allen's a former employee. He has an axe to grind. Of course, he's going to say something like this, but you can't just kind of swat that away. So if a judge is listening to this, right, or if a judge is trying to hear these arguments, I think there's a good faith basis to conduct some real discovery into the Commanders, to add the Commanders to this lawsuit. So I think that's the next logical step here. And Doug's get another story, and another really heavy lawsuit that, if established, Dan Snyder will have been the cause of, which not a good look. It's just not.
And it's enough. It's not just a bad look. You're messing with Gruden's money. You're messing with the NFL's money. You're messing with other owners' money. You're messing with other people's money, and that's really what it comes down to. We'll see where it goes. We'll continue watching and everything. Is there anything else that we should look forward to? Look forward. Is there anything that is about to pop off, or anything that's about to happen where our eye is there right now?
I'm always watching the Dan Snyder yacht tracker. I'm always watching that, but I think the latest, if people really want a full scope of this, Snyder could put the sale for team tomorrow, put the sale, have that tomorrow. I saw there was a report that at one point he was considering selling 20% of the team, not selling the whole thing. But we'll see. I mean, really the next thing, the last phase of this that we're really waiting for is the NFL's second report. It's you and I called the last time the do-over report. Mm-hmm. The first one wasn't transparent. The NFL's calling it independent, but we all know it really wasn't that independent. Yeah. But yeah, once that report comes out, that's what Jim Irsay was saying. That's what they're waiting for. Jim Irsay, the owner of the Colts, at the owners' meeting about a month ago, he said, we're waiting for that report to make a decision. So that's the next shoe to drop. Congress is certainly not going to force, Roger Goodell to kick Snyder out of the league. The Attorney General's office is not going to do that. They don't really have the power to do it. But the NFL, if they've commissioned this investigation, and it's something that they've spent, I think it's now up to a little over a year they've spent on it, that's the shoe to drop. That could come any day. Maybe Snyder's going to rush and try to voluntarily sell the team before that report comes out. Let's see. That's the shoe. It's kind of a race here to see what Snyder wants to do.
Yeah. And from if it comes out that Snyder was the one, or he was responsible for the leak, this is just one more thing that if he would have sold the team prior to any of this, he could, hey, that was the Commanders. That was a past thing. Maybe politicians or lawmakers would be willing to look past messing with Gruden's money, messing with the NFL's money, these civil lawsuits coming in from the DA or the Attorney General in DC. These are issues that will most likely continue on even if he does sell the team. So again, going back to why would a rational person do this? I think we're to the point, and you brought up, a couple episodes back, hey, Dan Snyder, here's like $6 billion. I think a rational person would do this. I think we can conclude from here that Dan Snyder is not a rational person.
Fair. That is 100% correct. We could talk about any owner in NFL history, Major League Baseball history, NBA history. They have like one or two allegations. They usually wave the white flag and they put their hand out. Like they make a little bow. They're like, please put the money in here. I'm ready to go. Give me my ticket. Snyder is fighting it. So, if we're comparing him to other reasonably situated owners of major sports franchises, he's really bucking that trend. So it gives us good content, but certainly doesn't make much sense.
No, yeah, I was going to say, I feel bad for the Commanders fans. However, for the fans of drama, it's really working out for us.
For sure.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you very much, Attorney Dan Lust. You can catch him on Twitter at Sports Law Lust and on his podcast Conduct Detrimental. And you've been on. You said you go on Kennedy on Live Nation. Is that it?
I go on. I go wherever the winds take me. But I've been on Fox Biz. I go on ESPN. I got a random shout out on McAfee's show. So the world of sports law is pretty narrow. So I guess, being a sports fan certainly helps break it down in digestible ways. And Doug's, I will mention, you know what the name of the congressional report was into Dan Snyder?
What was it?
Conduct Detrimental, name my podcast. A little bit of trademark infringement. I do say so myself. A little bit.
Watch it. They better watch it because you are an attorney. You know what to do. Well, thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate it. And it's Dan Snyder, so I'm sure I'll talk to you real soon about it again.
Oh, good. My pleasure.